You are listening to Radio Maria Canada. We now present the Health Hub, hosted by Kathy Biasi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Health Hub. I'm Kathy Biasi, your host, and along with our producer, Alex Diaz, we would like to welcome you to our show this morning. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, Kathy.
How are you?
I hope you're well. My throat is about to give me a little bit of a problem, so
you want to back off? I'll take it from here.
I'm doing well apart from that. Just a sec. Continue.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right. Well, I'll take it from here. How's that? Today's show is being taped, so no opportunity for calling in. But please do welcome us. Please do follow us on our social sites. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and we are at the Health Hub RMC on all three locations. And if you would like to email us, please do so at thh@radiomaria.ca. And of course, you can subscribe to our podcast. We are the Health Hub on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite podcast platforms. And as somebody noted to us, the Health Hub on these platforms there are no spaces between the letters. So it's the Health Hub, no space. So you can find us there. And you can also find our podcast on the Radio Maria Canada website, which is radiomaria.ca, and on my website, which is kathybiasi.com. We have a very interesting guest on our show today, Dr. Andy Chen. It's going to be a great conversation. He's just a delightful person, a wonderful person to talk to, very laid back, and I think you'll really enjoy listening to the show. Dr. Chen is a native of Maryland. He earned a Master's of Science in Biomaterials Engineering at the Johns Hopkins University and a doctorate in medicine at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine in Baltimore, Maryland. He completed his residency in orthopedic surgery at the Hospital for Joint Disease in New York, where he also completed a fellowship in orthopedic research at the Musculoskeletal Research Center in New York. Following this, he completed a fellowship in sports medicine at the Steadman-Hawkins Sports Medicine Clinic in Vail, Colorado. Dr. Chen practices at the Alpine Clinic in Franconia, New Hampshire, and is certified in orthopedic surgery by the American Board of Orthopedic Surgeons with subspecialty certification in sports medicine. Dr. Chen is the Chief Medical Officer for the United States Nordic Sport, a team physician for the United States Olympic Committee, and a team physician for the United States Ski and Snowboard Association. Dr. Chen is a fellow of the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons and the American Orthopedic Society of Sports Medicine. And in addition to numerous published articles, book chapters, and books, Dr. Chen has presented research on numerous international stages, national and regional forums, and has been featured on WMUR's New Hampshire Chronicle, several television interviews and presentations, and on radio interviews nationwide. He has assisted in the care of several professional sports teams and was a physician for Madison Square Gardens in New York City. Dr. Chen currently resides in New Hampshire with his wife, a specialist in plant-based nutrition, and his two teenage children. Fascinating man, and as I said, just a pleasure to listen to. You just want to, sit back with a nice cup of coffee and listen to him. Some of the things we'll be talking about on learning points are: can an elite athlete be a top performer on a plant-based diet? Is a plant-based diet suitable for all athletes? And why is there confusion about determining adequate protein levels still to this day? So everybody, please stay with us. We will be back in a few minutes to talk to Dr. Chen.
I'm not about to give up because I heard you say there's gonna be brighter days. There's gonna be brighter days. I won't stop, I'll keep my head up. No, I'm not here to stay. There's gonna be brighter days. There's gonna be brighter days. I just might bend, but I won't break. As long might bend, but I won't break. As long as I can see your face. When life won't play along and right keeps going wrong and I can't seem to find my way, I know where I am found, so I won't let it drag me down. No, I'll keep dancing in the way. When life won't play along and right keeps going wrong and I can't seem to find my way, I know where I am found, so I won't let it drag me down. No, I'll keep dancing in the way. I'm gonna move, I'm gonna move, I'm gonna move, I'm gonna move,
You are listening to Radio Maria Canada. We now continue with the program, The Health Hub, hosted by Kathy Biasi.
Welcome back, everybody. As mentioned, today's show once again is being taped, so no opportunity for calling in to speak to Dr. Chen. But if you have any questions for him, please feel free to email us at thh@radiomaria.ca. And do follow us on our social sites. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and we are at the Health Hub RMC on all three locations. Dr. Chen, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you're a very interesting guest. We are right now, this recording will be coming out, in a month or so, but we're in the middle of winter here. Are you having a hiatus from your work with your ski team?
We're actually not. Believe it or not, we're actually busier than ever. We currently have several athletes that are positive for COVID and they're abroad. So these are issues that I'm going to have to deal with later on today. The International Ski Federation, or FIS, is trying to make a reasonable season of it anyway. We are dealing with multiple cancellations and things of the sort, but we're making a good go at it and trying to keep our team healthy.
We are really malleable through all this, aren't we? It's amazing how people, I'm so impressed with how everybody that I have talked to you're the first person that I've talked to related to a professional athletic organization, but just in all aspects, people have been so adaptable to this. It's just, I continually am amazed at this, and congratulations for being able to keep putting out there and having the team going. What are the ages of your athletes approximately?
They range anywhere from 16 to perhaps about 25 or so. I do believe you're right, though. I think the fact that we're having a season at all is amazing. I think it's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. I think that, these are trying times, and it's amazing to me that these athletes, coaches, and officials are willing to put themselves out there when we're going through all this. And whereas a lot of us have chosen to be safe and hunker down at home, a lot of these guys are still traveling from venue to venue, and I suppose we can debate the safety of it, but in general, I think the World Cup has done pretty well in terms of infections. They've done very well with establishing protocols and setting bubbles, and so even though we are dealing with a few infections, it's remarkably low in incidence compared to what we would probably expect.
It's very interesting to me. Did you start off your career hoping to be associated with the U.S. Nordic ski team, or how did you fall into this? Because it's such a prestigious place to land.
I didn't. I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., playing fairly standard sports, basketball, football, lacrosse. It really wasn't until I did my fellowship in Vail, Colorado, that I got involved with the ski team. In 2008, I was named the head team physician of the men's ski jumping team. And from then it sort of took off from there. And now I'm the chief medical officer for USA Nordic, in charge of our Nordic teams and our effort in the Olympics. So
That's amazing. It really is amazing. So you've met up with some very professional and highly recognized names here in Canada, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I know that you've put me in touch with another athlete who just seems wonderful. But congratulations to you.
Thank you very much.
Now, our conversation, circling back to what we're here to talk about, is kind of your transition to a plant-based diet and how this really has had such a profound impact on your life. So talk to us about your diet before you decided to transition to plant-based.
So I grew up, as I said, in the suburbs of DC, and really just eating the standard American diet. You know, I grew up and in fact, I was probably more meat heavy than anything else. My parents were immigrants from Taiwan. They grew up not indigent, but my mother's father was a dentist, so they did pretty well by Taiwan standards. But in the 1940s, compared to the United States, they were pretty. I don't want to say backwards, but not as industrialized as the United States. And so they grew up with a sense that that meat is a sign of wealth. It's a sign of health. And so when they came to this country and became professionals, when my brother and I were being raised, I mean, we had meat at every single meal because they thought that correlated with good health and strength. And then when I was in high school, I played a lot of collision sports like football and lacrosse. And, in general, it was more favorable to be bigger and stronger and heavier than the other individual or other players on the field. And so, I grew up with a sense that I wanted to be as big and strong as possible. And that's how I ate. And I lifted heavy weights. And, I topped out at probably about 230 pounds, and I was pretty strong. And that's sort of how we lived our lives. I mentioned when I took over as head team physician of the U.S. ski jumping team, this was like a mind blown moment because I now started interfacing with athletes who didn't want to be as big and strong as possible. In fact, they wanted to be as strong as possible, but as light as possible. So this was a total paradigm shift for me. It was one of these things, though, where I felt like, well, that's what they need to do to be the athletes that they need to be. But that has little to do with me. So I continue to eat the standard American diet, even though my athletes were trying to minimize caloric intake. And the interesting thing is, at the time, I started to realize that it was the younger athletes who ate more like I did. But then again, the younger athletes are between 16 and 18, and they have the metabolism of a teenage boy. And so, they can essentially eat what they want and stay fit the entire time. The interesting thing was I started to notice that the more veteran athletes or the more successful athletes really limited things like meat and dairy intake. They would say things like, well, I don't like to eat a lot of meat in the mornings because it really just sits in my gut for a long time and affects my training and performance. And I don't really like to take milk in the morning or before a competition because I'm concerned that it's going to bloat me and affect my performance. So the interesting thing is that the more veteran, more successful athletes tended to really minimize meat and dairy and concentrate more on a plant-based diet, whether or not they recognize it at all. And so I started to take notice of it, but more in a way that I could help the other athletes, not really so much for myself. I think that really changed for me, though, in 2013. My sister-in-law was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 36. And so being the physician in the family, I did a lot of research. And one thing that really stood out for me, and actually my brother as well, who is not in healthcare, but going through all this, we discovered that almost every cancer book out there said, you really need to limit or eliminate meat and dairy. And that became a theme in probably 6 or 7 of the leading cancer books that were out there. And so we thought to ourselves, geez, well, if we minimize it, why not just eliminate it from our diets? And I'm not saying this is appropriate for everybody, but for us at the time, we thought maybe if we all go largely plant-based, then we might be able to affect the outcome of her disease. Now, the unfortunate thing is that my brother and his wife did not really take it to heart. They were more of the mentality, well, if she has limited time on this earth, then why not eat what you want. And so they never really took to it. But the interesting thing is that my wife and I really took to it, to the point that we are completely plant-based now. My wife, who is actually a pilot, got so hard into it that she went to a Forks Over Knives retreat and really got interested, and then went to the T. Colin Campbell Institute for Integrative Medicine at Cornell. She ended up getting a degree, and now we're really, really into this. And the one thing that has been fantastic is that now not only do I have sort of an academic knowledge of nutrition issues, but because we've gotten so hard into it, I have a working knowledge of it. I know how to eat. I know what to tell my athletes, because it's not just something I've read from a book. This is something that I live every day. And, you know, one thing that drives my wife nuts is that whenever I hang out with these guys, I always come back and I say, honey, we have to change. We need to work out more. We need to do this. We need to do that.
New ideas.
Yes, but the good news is that it's sort of become a symbiotic relationship where, you know, I'll say, geez, we need to incorporate more legumes into our diet. And at first, whenever we start something new, for example, the dishes that we make are not so tasty, not so palatable, but then we kind of figure it out. And then we start making really good stuff. And this is something that I can take back to the team, and I can say, hey, look, you know, if you want to get more chickpeas in your diet, this is a great way to do it. So I think it's really helped our family. I think that it's very much helped our team and my ability to help the team. So overall, I think it's just been a fantastic transition.
Have you I mean, I can tell from looking at you that you are not a big person. Other than weight loss, have you noticed any health benefits for you personally in the transition?
So yes, so the weight loss was dramatic, by the way. It's something that I did
230 pounds on you. How tall are you?
And now I'm down to 180.
Yeah.
And that's not with deliberate dieting. That's just with changing the way that I eat. You know, I sat down once and I calculated my nutritional requirements and my energy requirements, and I'm almost exactly where I need to be. My BMI right now is 21, with, you know, 20 to 25 being sort of ideal, I suppose. And that's not really with any sort of restriction. In fact, because I'm plant-based, I find myself hungrier more often, which is, I suppose, a good thing, because I'm really moving a lot of fiber and vitamins and things through my body. So if anything, I'm probably eating more, and yet I'm able to maintain a pretty low body weight and stay fit. You know, through the time, I also noticed, for example, my blood pressure was a little bit, it wasn't high, but it was a little bit borderline. Now it's exactly where it needs to be. I'm at like 120 over 65 or something like that. My pulse came down. My energy level is greater. I feel that there's a lot more mental clarity, and that's something that a lot of plant-based people talk about. When you initially go plant-based, you know, there's sort of a 2-week time when, you know, you're experiencing a little bit of gastric discomfort, a little bit of mental fogginess. But when you emerge from that, it's dramatic. I feel like I always tell people, it's like, you know, when you go to a new country or even just a new restaurant or something, and because it's brand new, you seem to take in the sights and the sounds with more mental clarity. And that's how you feel all the time when you're on a plant-based diet. So for us, it's been just a fantastic transition.
Are you actually working with athletes in their nutrition? Have you got a degree in nutrition that you are translating into a working relationship with athletes?
I personally do not have a degree in nutrition. I rely very much on my wife to help me with this. But you know, I don't try to sway my athletes into one way of eating. I try to give them tips on how they can improve how they eat. Now, there certainly are, and especially recently, more and more athletes are adopting a plant-based diet, particularly those athletes in disciplines where a lower BMI is favored. It is a great way to deal with getting adequate nutrition while not being as challenged with maintaining a healthy BMI for your sport, if it is a sport that is favored by low BMI. So I work with athletes routinely on nutrition, and when a plant-based athlete calls me up, I'm just made up, because I feel like I'm in my element and I can really help that person, probably more so than I feel that I could help people with omnivorous diets, because I've been plant-based for about 7 years now, going on 8 years now, and I'm just much more familiar with plant-based eating now.
There are a lot of pop-up diets. There are a lot of diets that you can read about on the internet, and keeping in mind the young age of a lot of these athletes. And we've talked about male athletes a little bit here. I'm sure you're working with female athletes as well.
Yes.
How do you talk to them about these diets that are popping up, that are, quoted as being transitional for your health? Are you able to talk to them sort of off of that cliff of jumping onto these fad diets?
So it's interesting that you asked that, because we noticed that it's usually the younger, less experienced athletes who deal more with fad diets. It's typically, for example, a younger athlete who comes into the season a little bit heavy, and they need to make weight, or they understand that they need to decrease their BMI in order to enhance their performance, and that's where we see more of the fad diets. The keto diet and the paleo diet, for example, are very popular among athletes for rapid weight loss. But what they don't realize is that caloric restriction is not really a great way to address decreasing weight. What a lot of athletes don't understand is that when you do, for example, an Atkins diet or a keto diet, this can actually induce muscle loss as the body goes into what's called ketosis. It's actually a starvation mode for the body to not utilize its preferred energy, which is basically carbohydrates and sugars, and shifting into a mode where they are now consuming fat. And while that does work, it also consumes muscle to a limited extent. So what they don't realize is they're actually working against themselves. The interesting thing is that it's the more veteran and successful athletes that don't do this. They realize that it's much better to maintain a healthy weight throughout the season, and even in the postseason, try to maintain that weight so that coming into the next season, they can optimize performance rather than trying to play catch up with losing the 5 kilos that they need to prior to the start of the training period. So we do see fad dieting, but it's really more, I'd say, among the less experienced and the younger athletes.
Well, it gets into the minds of kids. After break, I want to get onto this topic of macros. But these athletes are training, 6 hours a day, I imagine? Am I close? Is it more than that? Their caloric the needs must be huge. So to try and be on a restrictive diet and still maintain the calories that they need to get to their peak performance, is that an issue that you face as well?
Well, so let me just preface that by saying that these athletes don't really do any crash dieting in season. This is usually something where, the season typically ends in the mid-spring or so. Athletes generally have, say, a month to 6 weeks off. And during that time, that's when the less experienced athletes tend to be bad about their diets. They tend to say, geez, I'm glad the season's done. I'm going to have a bacon cheeseburger now, or I'm going to, eat a whole pack of Oreos. And it's something because they feel so deprived throughout the season that they go a little bit crazy after the season. And then they come into camp and they're 5-10 kilos over. And now we have to get their weight down just to start legitimate training. The issue, though, is that takes a good 4 to 6 weeks for them to lose that weight. So they're clearly behind the 8 ball. And by then we're into what's called the Summer Grand Prix season. And so they're really doing themselves a disfavor. The good news is that generally by the time the season proper starts, which isn't until November or December in Europe, by then they've usually dialed it in, and they don't really eat like that in terms of fad diets during the season. So by then they've usually dialed in what's going to work for them. They've worked out, nutrition plans, typically at the advice of one of our nutritionists. So we don't generally see that as a problem in season.
Okay, let's go to a break here. We're going to come back and talk to you about macros and how you deal with them on a vegetarian diet. So everyone will be back in just a couple of minutes here.
Another heartbreak day. Feels like you're miles away. Don't even need no shade when your sun don't shine. Too many passing dreams roll by like limousines. It's hard to keep believing when they pass you by and by. I know your heart been broke again. I know your prayers ain't been answered yet. I know you're feeling like you got nothing left. Well, lift your head. It ain't over yet, ain't over yet. So keep walking, soldier, keep moving on. Keep walking until the morning comes. Keep walking, soldier, keep moving on and lift your head. It ain't over yet, ain't over yet. Echoing inside your head are the words that your sweet mama said. Shoot for the moon, my dear, so you took game out of this atmosphere between high stakes and pump fakes. You're feeling like you can't vibrate. I can hold your hand, but I can't turn your eyes to freedom. I know your heart been broke again. I know your prayers ain't been answered yet. I know you're feeling like you got nothing left. Well, lift your head. It ain't over yet, ain't over yet. So keep walking, soldier, keep moving on. Keep walking until the morning comes. Keep walking, soldier, keep moving on and lift your head. It ain't over yet, ain't over yet. Hold on, Lord ain't finished yet. Hold on, he'll get you through this. Hold on, these are the promises I never will forget. I never will forget. So hold on, the Lord ain't finished yet. Hold on, he'll get you through this. Hold on, these are the promises I never will forget. I never will forget. I know your heart been broke again. I know your prayers ain't been answered yet. But it ain't over yet. It ain't over yet. So get up and move. Keep walking, soldier, keep moving on. Keep walking until the morning. You got to move. Keep walking, soldier, keep moving on and lift your head. It ain't over yet, ain't over yet. Lift up your head now. Keep walking, soldier, keep moving. Lift up your head now. Keep walking until the morning. Keep believing. Keep walking, soldier, keep moving on and lift your head. It ain't over yet, ain't over yet. Keep walking, soldier, keep moving on.
You are listening to The Health Hub here on Radio Maria Canada. A Catholic voice wherever you are. To contact us and be a part of the show, email thh@radiomaria.ca. We now continue with the program. Here once again is your host, Kathy Biasi.
Welcome back, everybody. We're having a great conversation here with Dr. Chen. I want to talk to you about Dr. Chen because I'm sure this pops up so often when you're talking to athletes. The idea of protein and macros and how much. I know when I was working out years ago, it was you take as much protein as you can get. You know, it's 1 point. Well, we're in grams here, but anyways, it was like. Well, you'll tell me what your translation is with the protein amounts, but it was get as much as you can. Every meal, protein shakes, eat meat, eat eggs. And studies have shown, and as we evolve, and because I've got into the cancer field, studies have shown that may not be the wisest pathway to go down. What have you discovered in your own search for health, and then in translating this in dealing with athletes at the caliber that you're working with them at?
So just to begin with, we honestly don't have a great idea of how much protein is necessary. The reason is that, unfortunately, a lot of the studies, including major studies from big sports organizations, they're conflicted. Either the researchers have some sort of vested interest, or the study is being sponsored by industry. So just leading off, we actually don't have a great idea of how much protein is necessary, at least in the elite athlete. We do have a much better idea of how much protein is necessary in quote unquote normal people. The way that protein requirements are calculated is something called protein balance, and we look at the net protein balance. And the way that that's calculated is we can measure, for example, how much protein is being taken in, and then we measure in the feces, for example, how much protein is there. And from that, we can determine a person's protein balance. And when your protein balance is perfectly balanced, in other words, you're not net positive or net negative, that's sort of where we believe that people have established a steady state. And these protein balance studies have been done since 1957. And in general, what we've discovered is that for an average adult who is not an elite athlete, or even someone who trains all the time, they estimate that for a man, we should have about 0.8 grams per kilogram per day. From the sports organizations, we believe anyway that perhaps somewhere between 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram per day is necessary for endurance athletes. And then if you are going to be someone who wants anabolic effects, that means building muscle or gaining size, 1.6 to 2 grams per kilogram per day is necessary, although some studies cite even up to 4 grams per kilogram per day.
Really?
Yes. And you know, the issue is that there are concerns about taking that much protein, although it still is very much controversial. We're always worried about things like renal damage. So, for example, if you take in a lot of protein, the way that that's cleared by the body is through expelling urea nitrogen, and that's through the urine. And the way that gets there is that the protein is absorbed by the body, dealt with by the body, and eventually excreted by the kidney. So there's always concern about renal damage, particularly in elderly individuals who may have some kidney insufficiency. Now that I will tell you though that it's controversial. It hasn't been proven either way that actually occurs. The second major area of concern is with bone density and calcium. In other words, when we take a large protein load, it creates an acidic environment inside our blood, and something has to buffer that. And the biggest natural buffer for our body is calcium, and the biggest reservoir of calcium in our body is the bones. And so the thinking is that if you eat too much protein, in order to buffer that protein inside your blood, you're going to leach calcium from your bones, and that may affect the bone density. Again, that hasn't been substantiated. It's more of a theoretical thing, but it's very difficult to do these protein studies simply because of the way that these are measured. So, for example, when we talk about protein digestibility, the way that we like to measure that in this day and age is to look at what we call the ileal digestibility. So we want to get samples from the ileum. Well, obviously, that's not an easy thing to do. The problem is that when we measure it in the feces, we're actually underestimating protein requirements because of losses from things like nasal secretions, menstruation, sloughing skin cells. And so we're actually losing protein in insensible ways that cannot be measured. But so the bottom line is we probably as a society ingest way too much protein for what the requirements actually are. So for a woman, we estimate that it's actually necessary to probably take in about 0.66 grams per kilogram per day. And for male, that's about 0.8. When we actually do measurements of populations, we see that in the United States, we're taking in probably about 1.64 grams per kilogram per day. And in Canada, that's about 1.5. So even just eating a standard diet, I don't think protein is a major concern if you're eating a standard diet. In fact, we probably get too much for what we need.
Do you do any microbial studies? Have you seen any microbial studies in differences in protein intake? And I've read several studies in the reflection of how the microbiome changes with respect to plant-based versus eating meat. Have you done any of those yourself or read any of those that you translate into your work?
I have not done any personal work on the subject, but you bring up a good point, which is that there is a difference between plant-based proteins and animal proteins. I would say that animal proteins are a much easier way to get complete proteins. A lot of plant proteins lack what are called essential amino acids. They also lack what are called branch chain amino acids. And one thing that's necessary, for example, for muscle protein synthesis are amino acids such as leucine and isoleucine and valine, which really aren't present in a lot of plant-based proteins unless you deliberately try. So for example, we know that beans, legumes, and pulses are excellent sources of essential amino acids. And in particular, you can get a lot of leucine, isoleucine, valine, and others that are limited in other plant-based proteins. So it's not that you can't get it from plant-based proteins. You have to deliberately construct your diet to include those things, particularly at the elite level.
Yeah, I can see where that would pose a lot of challenges for the elite level, where you are trying to more weigh in on the protein. Standard diet, standard people, people that are, like me, everyday people. I work out, but I'm certainly not an elite athlete. I think it's well within my grasp to get the amount of protein that I need in my diet. I mean, a good protein powder gives you a solid base for the day to launch off to get your protein requirements. Have you found, as you've seen the transition of more and more athletes to a plant-based diet, have you noticed a difference in injuries and bone structure? Maybe once, if I'm sure there are broken bones that you see, have you noticed any difference?
Thankfully, no. It's interesting that you bring that up, because that is probably one of the major criticisms of a plant-based diet, that because of relative caloric restriction, that we might not, relatively speaking, get enough energy, and that may predispose people to what we call fragility fractures. In truth, though, we have not seen a change in that. We believe that the body sort of adapts to what it needs to do. A lot of studies have been done in bone mineral density, for example, in plant-based athletes who are young, because that's obviously of major concern in terms of bone development. And we have not seen, it has not been proven anyway, I should say, that younger athletes who adopt a plant-based diet have increased fractures. That has not been the case.
I was actually going the other way, because you were talking about excessive protein and the leaching of calcium, and as athletes get older, and this, obviously the youngers don't feel as much as the older athletes. I was wondering if those who transitioned to a plant-based diet actually had stronger bones.
I think it's probably too early to tell that. I think, 2 years ago was declared the year of the vegan. In other words, this is just coming into its own stride. I think in 2015, the number of businesses that called themselves plant-based or vegan went up by something incredible, like 30,000% or something like that. So we're really just coming into a different population of athletes who are perhaps more in tune with their health. I know, for example, my kids who are 16 and 14, they look at nutrition, they think about nutrition, whereas at that age, I didn't think about it at all. My biggest, thought at that time was how can I successfully, get a full bag of Doritos in and skip dinner in some way. But my kids don't think that way. They actually think about these things, and I don't even know where that's coming from. Perhaps it's because I think nationwide there is, I think, a more a greater awareness of nutritional issues. But I feel like that's dichotomous. I feel like as much as there is a population that is more focused on health and nutritional issues, the majority of the population is headed in a wrong direction. So it's almost like we're polarizing, where there's a certain group of people who are really into health and becoming more and more aware of their own bodies. But thankfully so. I think, though, to your point, it's too early to tell, because we're really just getting into the time where, out of a team of 10 athletes, 3 or 4 of them will come up to me and say, I'm thinking about being plant-based, or I am plant-based. How do I optimize my nutrition? When I started really dealing with plant-based issues in 2013, there was one person that I was speaking with about this, one athlete, and she wasn't even on my team. So it's a different day and age. I think that athletes are much more willing to look at nutritional issues. They understand now how that can affect their performance. And thankfully, they're much more responsible about constructing their diets to include everything that they need from an energy standpoint, from a macronutrient standpoint, in order to optimize their performance.
Well, intuitively, I would think that these athletes, if they're feeling sluggish, just you and I, and if you're feeling sluggish, if you've had a couple of days where you feel that you're dogging it, you would look to your diet, or you would look to your calorie usage. I would think that these athletes are so in tune, and you yourself are so in tune with your body, that if there's been an excessive training, or if there's been a lack of training, you get to that point where you're adjusting your diet and you're able to look at the macros and say, you know what, I maybe have not got what I needed, or I maybe got too much. And I think ultimately that's what we're trying to do, right? Is to get athletes and everybody to understand that we are unique in our own needs, and our needs will fluctuate. And I think with what you're doing and educating them on a plant-based diet and the merits of it is giving them a deeper understanding of how their body works. And I think that may be the largest step we've taken over the years, is to show this huge connection between the fuel and the output. Is that, do you think, a shift that you've seen?
Yes. And in fact, I think it's a very positive shift. 10, 15 years ago, when dealing with these teams, it was like pulling teeth to try to get them to meet with a nutritionist. They thought, geez, why do we have to do this? I already know how to eat. When in truth, they didn't at all. They were just pure talent. And I think they understand now that it's a combination of talent, but also effort. And part of that effort is realizing that food, which for most people is enjoyable and nutritious and a way to live, for them it's a necessity. It's not just food; it's fuel, and they really think of it that way. They think, this is down to, for example, timing of meals. When am I going to eat a slice of whole wheat bread to optimize my later performance? And they time it down to the minute, to the point where they'll look at their watch and say, geez, it's time for me to go to the cafeteria because I have to fuel, anticipating that they're going to have this big cross-country ski effort in 3 hours. And so it's interesting. It's not just what they're eating that they're focusing on, but every aspect of it, the timing of it. What am I going to do for recovery after my race? So they're not even just thinking of the race that's this afternoon. They're thinking, well, how am I going to recover in time for the competition tomorrow? So I think thankfully athletes, even at the youngest level, have taken the responsibility and charge of designing their diets, designing their macronutrient intake and timing to match what they need in terms of performance. So I think we're headed in a good direction with that. We're obviously not there, but I think in general, whether they're plant-based or not, everyone's paying a lot more attention to nutrition.
Well, have you noticed over your years working with elite athletes that talent isn't enough, and that records are broken by fractions of seconds versus seconds, and that minute, the details to diet or the details to sleep are really what is jumping one athlete over another? I I don't know this field very well. But I know like records aren't broken by huge amount of seconds. They're broken by fractions of seconds. And is this the area that's making the difference?
Perhaps. I do think that there is some real talent out there, though. Like, for example, when you look at an athlete like Kobe Bryant or Steph Curry or even Bodie Miller, these guys break all the rules. Bodie has just this sort of strange skiing style. He doesn't do anything that, you would teach someone else, yet he was just a champion. And for him, I think it was just sheer talent. I think for the 99.99999% of people out there, though, these issues like sleep, like habits, like nutrition, they do make a difference. And I think the athletes are realizing that, and they're paying particular attention to it. Because you are right, these races are no longer settled by seconds. They are thousandths of a second. And anything that will give you just that one little edge is something that these athletes are focusing on. So it's, unfortunately, I suppose in a way you could look at that sports are, at least at the elite level, aren't necessarily done for fun anymore. This is very much a career and a business for them. And I think in the realization that you can no longer just sort of walk haphazardly into a competition and win it, everyone is focusing on those little things that will give them an edge, and nutrition is an important component of that.
Yeah, it's well, you're setting these kids up for life. I can't see them sweat. I mean, of course, you loosen up when you're not as deeply in training, but what you're doing and what you're professing and the life you're living, and obviously the influence that you have over your athletes being such a young age, are going to be profound for the rest of their lives. And whether they know it or now, I'm sure you are going to be looked back as a huge impact on their overall health and success. So I congratulate you on that. I think it's a wonderful thing you're doing, and new. You don't hear a lot of people in your position professing a plant-based diet when you're dealing with elite athletes. So I find it very refreshing to speak with you. Do you have any final thoughts before we end this great talk?
Well, what I wanted to emphasize is that while a plant-based diet, I don't think it's something, well, I don't profess it in terms of everyone should go plant-based. I think every athlete has to make that decision for themselves. I do think that a plant-based diet has not been shown to offer advantages over an omnivorous diet with respect to performance, although it may have dramatic benefits later on in life, but it doesn't appear to be a detriment. The important thing is if an athlete is committed to remaining plant-based and becoming and maintaining a status as an elite athlete, there's a way to do it. You just have to be attentive to it. You have to be aware of it and carefully construct your diet in order to optimize your performance. But it can be successfully done, as many world champion athletes can tell you.
And more and more. And again, we're talking about individualism. So wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Chen, for joining us. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Kathy.
And everybody, we'll talk to you next week on The Health Hub.
You have been listening to The Health Hub, hosted by